Good afternoon. My name is Alex Reyes, and I am Chief of Staff and Senior Counsel to Kristen Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. Assistant Attorney General Clark could not be with us here today because she's attending a funeral. However, she conveys her deep regrets and reaffirms her strong commitment to advancing and protecting the rights of people with disabilities. On behalf of the department, along with our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services, it is my distinct honor to welcome you to a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Supreme Court's landmark decision in Olmstead v. LC, a decision that has transformed the lives of Americans with disabilities. We have an outstanding program planned for you today. In just a few minutes, you will hear from Deputy Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Mathis, who will discuss the history and importance of the Olmstead case and will provide updates on the department's recent enforcement efforts. Next, we will hear from one of our interagency co-hosts, Melanie Fontes Rayner, Director of the Office for Civil Rights, representing the Department of Health and Human Services. Director Rayner will talk about the efforts to embed Olmstead widely in federal policy. Following that, we'll hear a panel discussion about the efforts of both the Department of Justice and Department of Health and Human Services to enforce Olmstead. The panel will be led by Reagan Rush, Principal Deputy Chief of the Civil Rights Division's Special Litigation Section, one of the leaders of our enforcement efforts. The esteemed panel will feature key enforcement staff from the Civil Rights Division's Disability Rights Section and HHS's Office for Civil Rights. They will be joined by speakers who have been able to live in their own homes as a result of DOJ and HHS enforcement of Olmstead. Next, we'll join together to view a short film clip featuring families from one of our Olmstead cases. And immediately following that, we will be joined by Marlene Salo, Executive Director of the National Disability Rights Network, who will lead a panel of speakers with disabilities to describe what Olmstead has meant to them. And finally, we'll hear from a panel of agency partners led off by Allison Barkoff, senior official performing the duties of the administrator of HHS's Administration on Community Living, another of our partners and co-hosts today. That panel of interagency partners will include the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Labor, and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Together, they will highlight how their agency services help make Olmstead a reality by supporting people in their own homes, in their own communities. But before we get started, I want to introduce a very special guest. Neera Tanden, Domestic Policy Advisor to President Biden. Neera has been a steadfast champion of civil rights, including the rights of people with disabilities. She has a long and distinguished history in public policy, and we are thrilled to have her join us today. It is my distinct privilege and honor to welcome her to give a few opening remarks. Neera?
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm really honored to be part of this conversation and this really a celebration. And I consider this a celebration of a kind of transformation in our country. Obviously, there's much work we need to do to ensure that we are fully inclusive of disabled Americans, people with disabilities, but we, particularly at this moment where we are at the end of a term with the Supreme Court, I think it is a great reminder of how our laws, our courts, helped us reimagine a much more inclusive country with landmark decisions like Olmstead. And that rethinking, that change in our laws, helped transform the way we all think about inclusion, equity, and really ensuring that people with disabilities can live to their full potentials as Americans. And that really infuses the work of the Biden-Harris administration. I am the President's Domestic Policy Advisor and oversee the Domestic Policy Council, and I'm privileged to work with Rachel Patterson on my staff. Rachel, if you want to just, Rachel is a special assistant to the President on disabilities and really ensures that all of our policies throughout the government are as responsive as possible. And but we have the privilege, she and I, of working for an administration where we have put equity and really an equity lens that includes people with disabilities at the forefront of our work across agencies. And we're really using every lever to do so, from executive actions to implementation of legislation to inclusion in landmark legislation of real provisions to help all Americans. And so I'm really just going to touch on a few of those areas today to highlight our overall approach. And it really starts with the actions we took at the beginning of this administration when the President signed an executive order to advance equity throughout the federal government and was really focused on ensuring that that equity, which was an unprecedented mandate across the federal government, and a whole of government approach, that focus really included the idea of integration and the full participation in society of Americans with disabilities. And that wasn't just language in a report, it's really had tangible impact over the last several years. And just to provide a few examples, we're really proud of the fact that the Department of Transportation is improving the accessibility of public transportation and rail systems so that people can get to school and work and receive medical care. The department is committed to adopting the public rights-of-way guidelines that will help disabled travelers navigate our streets and sidewalks, a very basic, important improvement in the way we live our lives. We are also requiring accessible airplane restrooms and safe handling of wheelchairs at airports because people with disabilities must be able to travel safely and with dignity. The Social Security Administration is simplifying program rules so that people with disabilities aren't punished when they receive help from family and friends. We really shouldn't have a system where that help you need the most and is actually the best for you is not properly accorded what it should be. We also launched a campaign to increase applications for the Supplemental Security Income, SSI, from underserved communities so that more people can receive support from the essential safety net. And second, so that is executive actions we've taken, and we're also thinking through legislation. And we're working tirelessly to ensure that people with disabilities are benefiting from the historic investments this administration has made and the President has secured. The bipartisan infrastructure law is making our nation more accessible and resilient. To date, localities are already working to improve the accessibility of 83 rail stations across 23 cities and 11 states, and we still have 2 more years of funding to release. This means more people with disabilities can get to where they need to go and really ensure that they can have the transportation access everyone else does. And while we improve accessibility, the Department of Transportation is also reminding contractors of their obligations to provide good jobs for people with disabilities when they build these projects. So really at the beginning of the work we're doing, we're trying to integrate equity and particularly equity for people with disabilities. The Inflation Reduction Act is also helping many people with disabilities on Medicare save money in their prescription drugs, so they aren't choosing between filling a prescription or paying rent. That's a critical component of our work at the DPC, whether it's $35 cap, $35 cap on insulin, a $2,000 cap on all prescription drugs that seniors will have for the very first time. We are trying to make healthcare much more affordable and accessible for all Americans. And we are very proud of the fact that the President's American Rescue Plan is investing nearly $37 billion across all 50 states in home and community-based services. 21 states have used those funds to reduce or eliminate waiting lists for home and community-based services, diverting people from institutional care. The President would like to do a lot more in that space, and we've been pushing hard with Congress and really appreciate everyone's engagement on that issue, because we really think of this as a means by which we allow many, many Americans to live with dignity. And in April, we released a rule that will require states to report on Medicaid waiting lists, quality measures, and service delivery of home and community-based services, so that we can ensure people aren't just eligible for services, but are actually receiving the services they need. And the President continues to call for further investments, as I said. So stepping back, I would say that particularly at this moment, as we await a range of Supreme Court decisions, and we have some concerns that those decisions will contract opportunity instead of expanding opportunity. The Olmstead decision and the transformation of our laws that have taken place since, and the way we think about inclusion and inclusion of all Americans, is a real reminder that when we have a justice system that is delivering an expansive vision for the country, a justice system that is ensuring that our laws and our country and our government is working towards inclusion, not away from inclusion, that can also spur a generation of leaders and thinkers to build on that success in all the work we do. And we're really proud of our work in the Biden-Harris administration. Much more to do, but to really ensure that when we are passing laws, when we are delivering resources, that we don't just have a vision that those resources go to some Americans or some places, but they really are meant to ensure that every American, all of us, can reach our full potential, and we have the transportation systems, the housing systems to do it. I kind of interrupted your clap there, but thank you very much. And I really want to express my gratitude on behalf of the White House, of the leaders here who you will hear from, who are really ensuring that that vision is implemented across the board, and that we are enforcing where we need to enforce. And I will turn it now back to Alex Rios.
Alex Rios again, and I apologize for not doing this to start. For those who cannot see me, I am a just under 6 foot male, brown skin, black man with a beard and shaved head. Now, thank you, Neera, for your kind words. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jennifer Mathis, Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. As many of the folks in this room know, Jennifer has been a leader in the disability rights community for a long time. As Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Jennifer oversees the enforcement of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Olmstead decision. In a prior position, Jennifer played a key role in coordinating strategy and briefing the Olmstead case. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alex. And please, everybody, bear with me because I have very little voice today. So in the spirit of the ADA, I'm asking for a reasonable accommodation. And I should say I am a white woman with short, sort of mousy brown hair and black suit and green shirt. So I want to start by remembering the two pioneering women who took their case to the Supreme Court 25 years ago, Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson. Yes. Who both had mental health and intellectual disabilities, had cycled in and out of Georgia institutions for years because they could not get the services they needed in the community. They found themselves stuck in a Georgia State psychiatric hospital for years after their doctors had said they should be discharged. Lois and Elaine wanted to receive services in their communities, near family and friends, and when the state of Georgia refused, the women stood up for their rights and filed suit. The Supreme Court agreed with them, ruling that unjustified segregation of people with disabilities is a form of discrimination under the ADA. The court recognized the harm done by needless segregation. As Justice Ginsburg wrote, institutional placement of persons who can handle and benefit from community settings perpetuates unwarranted assumptions that persons so isolated are incapable or unworthy of participating in community life. Olmstead and the ADA demand that we do better. The decision demands that we stop writing off people with disabilities as incapable or unworthy of participating in society and offer them the services they need to live in their own homes and communities, work in regular jobs, and go to school with their non-disabled peers. It demands a general expectation that people with disabilities be able to live the same kinds of lives as people without disabilities. And it calls on all of us to fight the stereotypes and misconceptions about disabilities that have diminished the lives of too many for too long. In the years since Olmstead, the Department's Civil Rights Division has worked to maximize its impact. We have pursued enforcement on behalf of people with all types of disabilities, including people with mental health disabilities, those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and those with physical disabilities of various types. We have brought cases on behalf of adults as well as children, and we have pursued enforcement with respect to all types of settings, not just where people live, but also where they work and where they spend their days and where they go to school. We have pursued matters where insufficient community services resulted in needless institutionalization, but also needless incarceration. And we have enforced Olmstead all around the country, from Alaska to Texas, from Maine to California, and many places in between. Just this week, we released 2 sets of Olmstead findings. One finding that the state of Missouri needlessly segregated adults with mental health disabilities in nursing homes and used its public guardianship system to facilitate that segregation. And one finding that the state of Utah unnecessarily segregated people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in sheltered workshops and day settings. We have issued many more Olmstead findings during the last 4 years. At the same time, we continued our work on existing Olmstead agreements in Georgia, New Hampshire, North Carolina, New York, West Virginia, Rhode Island, and North Dakota, and brought a successful closure to an agreement in Oregon. We will continue to work tirelessly to safeguard the rights of people with disabilities around the country to be fully included in their communities. But the department does not work alone. We act on behalf of people who are brave enough to stand up and demand their rights under the law. We will hear from a number of those courageous people today. Our work also depends on advocates for people with disabilities, like many of you in this room. We thank you for your diligence and your commitment to justice. And we partner with colleagues across the federal government to help fulfill the promise of Olmstead. Delivering on that promise calls for a whole-of-government approach to community integration. I want to recognize our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services who helped put together this event, HHS's Administration for Community Living and its Office for Civil Rights, as well as our federal partners participating today from the Department of Labor, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. All of those agencies play a key role in helping to make Olmstead a reality for people with disabilities. And now it is my privilege to turn it over to the Director of HHS's Office for Civil Rights, Melanie Fontes Rayner. As the Director of OCR, she is responsible for enforcing federal civil rights laws, including disability discrimination laws and community integration mandates, as well as HIPAA rules and the Patient Safety and Quality Improvement Act and Patient Safety Rule. She previously served as a counselor to Secretary Becerra, and for many years has advocated to make healthcare more accessible for all people and to address unlawful discrimination. Director Fontes Rayner.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here today. And of course, thank you to our colleagues at the Department of Justice for co-hosting this with us. I think it's really important to occupy this space and to celebrate this space. And so obviously this is happening across the country, but here I think it's very special in this building that we get to be here today to talk about not only the work that's been done, but the work that we still have to do, right? We're not done yet. And so I think it's important for all of us to take a moment of joy for this space and for our Olmstead anniversary. You're allowed to applause. Sorry, some of you thought that was funny. My name is Melanie Fontes Rayner. I am the director at the Office for Civil Rights. I'm a Mexican-American woman with brown skin. I have dark, curly black hair to my shoulder, and I'm wearing a navy blue suit with a rainbow scarf around my neck today. And my pronouns are she, her, ella. So again, I wanted to just take that moment for us to recognize this space and to recognize the work that we've done and the work that we keep needing to do. It's difficult to say in words how significant this ruling was and continues to be every single day. Right before I was speaking here, I was in the green room. It's not really green. Everything here looks like I'm in Italy. It's very fancy at the Department of Justice. HHS does not look like this. But I was in the green room and I was just speaking with a lot of the advocates and families, and so I thought that was really important and really special for the work that we all do. Immediately following the Olmstead decision, OCR, so my OCR, alongside our colleagues at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, issued guidance documents to state Medicaid directors. This was to help them develop their community service delivery systems and Olmstead plans, and subsequently OCR at HHS worked across the government and the country to identify barriers and make recommendations to support community integration nationwide. And while I didn't work on those things because I was not here then, some of our staff at the time did, and so I want to recognize Robin Sue Ferbosi from our team at the Office for Civil Rights. Stand up, Robin Sue, who many of you know she is petite in nature, but not in force, which she uses the law to advocate for people and to create space to do this work. So I'm very grateful for her leadership and all that she's done. As part of that, we launched a new strike force just this year to recognize the growing number of Olmstead cases we're seeing at the Department of Health and Human Services. And to date, we've already helped over 500 adults and children and worked in over 12 states across the country. Thank you. This, of course, is under the leadership of President Biden and Secretary Becerra, who started his career as a disability rights advocate in California at a legal aid fund, to take aggressive, proactive steps to ensure that Olmstead is enforced nationwide and to ensure our healthcare system and human services are following it as a matter of law. As many of you know, we've been very busy at the Office for Civil Rights, breaking ground on new rules that are really important in this space for Olmstead and beyond, and for persons with disabilities. And we're really proud of that work. So one of those rules, the final rules, one that bolsters protections for people with disabilities under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Many of you know these rules had not been updated in more than 50 years substantively, as my staff tells me. That's a nerd joke for those of you who don't understand, just tiny, tiny edits. But we recently overhauled them completely, and they take effect in a couple of weeks. So that's a really important rule that we prioritized and worked on. And then in addition to that, one that makes care more accessible for people with disabilities, but also advances that in the insurance context, Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. Both of these advance justice, both of these advance equity, and we're really proud of the teams that worked on this. And of course, oh, thank you. You don't have to keep applauding. Of course, none of that would have been possible without many of the people in this room. You used your voices, you made sure that these rules were prioritized, and you held our feet to the fire. And you should keep doing that because we're not done yet. This is such a critically important time as we work to implement these rules across the country, engagement with stakeholders, making sure that for the first time, for example, in 1557, where the integration mandate is recognized in insurance, that we're working with all of our covered entities, whether it's insurance companies or hospital systems or advocates and states. This is a really important charge we have, and we're looking forward to continuing this work with all of you. Alongside these rules, many of you know we're also a law enforcement agency, and unlike DOJ, we enforce Olmstead, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 and Section 1557. And in that space, we've had some really kind of awesome cases that we've been able to advance change and make this work happen. Again, thanks to Robin Sue and her team. One of those includes our recent findings and Olmstead findings in our joint investigation with the Rhode Island U.S. Attorney, as well as the U.S. Department of Justice, where the state of Rhode Island was violating its most integrated setting obligations by segregating children with behavioral health needs in psychiatric hospitals and over-hospitalizing them. That's a work in progress, obvious, but something we're really proud of and something we hope is a deterrent across the country for over-hospitalization of kids. We also had an announcement this week where we announced a case with the state of Iowa involving Garrett Fry, a disability advocate who's here with us today to tell us his story. Let's give it up for Garrett. So as you can see, embedding Olmstead, across federal policies and our law enforcement helps us expand its reach and impact, whether it be in our HHS programs and services or the entities that receive HHS funds, state or local governments, and so more across the country that we can do in this space, benefiting from this landmark decision. At my office, at the Office for Civil Rights, this work is ongoing. That's because Olmstead and its promise that people with disabilities have a right to decide where they want to live or receive services in the most integrated setting appropriate remains true and is a tenet by which we practice. As you'll hear from the next panel, OCR has used this clear integration mandate in our final rules to take enforcement to deliver on Olmstead's promise of greater inclusion and equality for people with disabilities. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for those of you able to be in person. Now I'd like to introduce you to Reagan Rush, Principal Deputy Chief in Special Litigation Section for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice, to lead our next panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Fontes-Reiner. My name is Reagan Rush, and I'm the Principal Deputy Chief at the Special Litigation Section. I'm a tall white woman with long brown hair, and I'm in all black today. The promise of Olmstead can ring hollow without robust enforcement at the federal level and throughout the tireless work of advocates across the country. At the federal level, DOJ has focused our enforcement on systemic patterns of Olmstead violations that warrant the potential for court enforcement. And where the administrative enforcement process may be more suitable, the Office of Civil Rights at Health and Human Services can bring their enforcement tools to vindicate people's rights. At bottom, all of our investigations, settlements, and lawsuits are about making sure people with disabilities have access to the services they need and are entitled to live at home in their own communities. First, I'd like to introduce our panel. Liz McDonald is a deputy chief at the Disability Rights section of the Civil Rights Division and is focused exclusively on Olmstead enforcement. Liz led the division's successful litigation in United States v. Florida that you'll hear more about shortly. Diana Villa was a class member in the joint private and department Olmstead litigation against the state of New York, which settled in 2013. Diana has moved from a segregated adult home to community-based supported housing through the settlement. And Robin Sue from Boise is the Deputy Director of the HHS Office of Civil Rights Strategic Planning Division, leading OCR's Olmstead work. While at DOJ, prior to joining OCR, she helped formulate the United States position as amicus in the Olmstead decision itself and helped plant the seeds for DOJ's early enforcement of Olmstead. Okay. And Garrett Fry is a lifelong disability advocate, including winning a case in the Supreme Court to attend public school with needed supports. And recently, as a result of a complaint he filed with the Office of Civil Rights, he now also has the necessary supports to remain in his home and live an integrated life as an adult. I'll start with a discussion with just a few examples of DOJ's Olmstead work over the last several years. First, children with mental health disabilities who are separated from their families and placed in facilities sometimes far from their own communities continue to be a focus of our work. Following extensive investigations, we released 4 findings reports, including one in partnership with the Office of Civil Rights to address this issue in Maine, Nevada, Alaska, and Rhode Island. The unnecessary institutionalization of adults in nursing facilities and adult care homes is also a very active area of our Olmstead work. In addition to our findings report, this week in Missouri regarding people with mental health disabilities unnecessarily institutionalized in nursing facilities and the public guardianship system's role in those admissions, we concluded investigations in South Carolina and Nebraska concerning people with mental health disabilities in nursing facilities and adult care homes, and filed suit in Colorado to vindicate the rights of people with physical disabilities unnecessarily institutionalized in nursing facilities. This week, we also issued findings concerning Utah's unnecessary segregation of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in sheltered workshops and day programs. It's also the subject of ongoing implementation in Rhode Island and a consent decree we successfully resolved in Oregon. We have also focused on how effective Olmstead enforcement can prevent criminal justice interaction for people with mental health disabilities and finalized a settlement agreement with Alameda County, California, addressing that issue. And finally, our Olmstead work safeguards the rights of students with disabilities to be educated alongside their non-disabled peers. The division continues to litigate GNET's case against the state of Georgia, where it seeks to vindicate the rights of thousands of public school students with behavior-related disabilities from being unnecessarily segregated in separate and unequal educational programs. And recent findings in Alabama highlight the unnecessary segregation of students with mental health disabilities in schools on the campuses of psychiatric residential treatment facilities. In each of these matters, the division is working to ensure that people with disabilities have meaningful opportunities to live and receive services at home and their communities. We're also continuing our work to ensure implementation of Olmstead settlement agreements in states across the country that provide the opportunities for people to transition from or avoid placement in institutions, as well as segregated work and educational settings. I'll now turn this over to Liz McDonald. Liz, can you talk a little bit more about a few of the division's Olmstead cases? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Reagan. I'm Liz McDonald. I'm Liz McDonald from the Disability Rights section, and I now want to dive deeper. Okay, that's better. I'll start over. I'm Liz McDonald from the Disability Rights section at DOJ. I'm a white woman with brown hair and black and white suit jacket. You've heard today about the breadth of the division's Olmstead work, and I now want to dive deeper and tell you about a few of those matters in more detail. Just 2 days ago, the division issued a letter of findings to the state of Utah explaining that Utah is violating Title II of the ADA by unnecessarily segregating people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in segregated settings during the day, such as sheltered workshops and day facilities, instead of helping them find work and spend their days in the community. In these large warehouse-like workshops, people spend hours doing repetitive tasks like sorting recycling, shredding paper, or folding laundry, often for less than minimum wage. Workers only interact with other people with disabilities in the workshop and with staff who are paid to supervise them. The division is also addressing segregated day settings for people with mental health disabilities. We recently issued a letter of findings against the state of Nebraska, explaining that the state is unnecessarily segregating people with serious mental illness in segregated day facilities and assisted living facilities, and restricting access to critical mental health services in the community. In another significant matter this week, the department issued findings against the state of Missouri, finding that thousands of adults with mental health disabilities were unnecessarily placed in nursing homes. In some of these facilities, over 80% of the residents have diagnoses of bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and most residents require little to no assistance with physical activities. Yet, because community services are unavailable, they languish in nursing facilities. Further, we found that the state's public guardianship system has served as a means of funneling people with mental health disabilities into nursing homes where they do not want to live. Now, let's travel to Florida. United States versus Florida is a case with a very long history, but the goal has always been the same: to make sure that children with disabilities have the opportunity to grow up at home with their families. In 2012, the department found that the state of Florida was unnecessarily segregating hundreds of children with complex medical needs in nursing homes and placing other children at serious risk of that segregation by limiting their access to services like in-home nursing that would allow the children to move to or remain at home. The department brought the case to trial last year. Many courageous families testified and had their voices heard. They told the court about the incredible struggles they experienced to bring and keep their children at home. Without critical medical services like in-home nursing, the parents explained how they lost sleep, lost jobs, and sacrificed their own health to make sure their children had the care they needed at home. And some parents, unable to sustain this, were ultimately forced to place their children in nursing facilities. But what was so powerful about this testimony, and in the video you'll see later today, was the value that each of these families placed on community living. When children live in the community, they have access to the unconditional love of their parents and grandparents, laughter and play with siblings, and the simple things that come from the daily rhythm of family life, like walks to the park, or trips to the beach, or family movie night. The court heard these stories, and because of that, because of these families' willingness to share their stories, the court was able to understand these children and their families as people, seeing not just their diagnoses and their medical needs, but their human need for and their legal right to care in the community. In July 2023, the court issued a decision in favor of the United States, observing that children, quote, deserve equality and freedom from isolation, both as a matter of right and conscience. The next case I want to talk about is one of our older cases, United States versus the state of New York. In 2013, we entered a settlement agreement with New York to resolve allegations that the state had violated the ADA by needlessly segregating people with serious mental illness into large adult homes. Virtually all of the people living in these homes could live in their own homes or apartments with support in what is known as supported housing. While this settlement is now 11 years old and has helped thousands of people transition from adult homes, it is still today providing people with disabilities a critically important path to transition to their own apartments with services. And Diana Villa, one of the class members from this lawsuit, has graciously agreed to be here today to share her story. So Diana, I want to turn it to you now. You are one of the many class members in this case. You used to live in an adult home in New York City, and as a result of the settlement, you've been able to move to your own home. And I want to ask you some questions about that. But first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a 61-year-old Hispanic woman, petite, with short gray hair and a pink jacket. I currently live in Regal Park, which is in central Queens, New York. I grew up depressed and had this follow me throughout my life. Despite this, I worked at LaGuardia Community College for 20 years before I got very sick. I was hospitalized many times over many years before I finally was diagnosed with bipolar and was properly treated. I still have mild agoraphobia, but I take classes online. I am 2 semesters away from graduating with my master's degree. I hope to return to teaching. Thank you. I hope to return to teaching, but this time only 1 course at a time and working remotely. I enjoy gardening on my windowsill, eating out with my fiance Roberto, and movies and playing with my 2 puppies, 2 miniature schnauzers.
And Diana, you used to live in an adult home in New York City, is that right?
Yes. Individuals with severe mental illness and physical challenges are dumped into adult homes and left to languish and die. I lived in Bell Harbor Manor in Rockaway, Queens for 12 years. This adult home was my sanctuary, but it was never my home.
Can you tell us what your room was like there and what were your days like?
It was a sad life. We were cramped 2 in a very small room. It wasn't always safe to socialize outside the room. The food sucked. The vegetables were always mushy and overcooked. I didn't have enough money to buy anything like fresh cut tulips in the springtime or a variety of vegetables for every week. My health was dwindling, so I had to learn to eat better on a very tight budget. Most adult home residents received $200 or less of an allowance back then for personal use. Once a month, we went to the movies on discount days. We window shopped at Kings Plaza Mall. Most of all, I spent time watching TV at home, at the home, because I had developed the fear of going outside alone.
And what did you miss about your old life when you were living there?
I miss being able to afford fresh-cut flowers, a variety of fresh-cut vegetables, being able to make arroz con pollo. I miss all the culture and events in Manhattan. I miss being able to do my woodworking and my painting. I miss my apartment, my rent-stabilized apartment in Sunnyside, Queens, which is bright and sunny, which helped me to have a green thumb. It was 10 minutes from Manhattan, where I often took a short bus ride to sit in familiar coffee shops and write in my journal, or easily go into the city to see a show or a play. I miss being able to afford buying clothes and shoes at the end of the season when they were mostly 70 to 80% off.
Could you move out if you wanted to? Why not?
I didn't have the means to save enough money for 2 months security deposit for an apartment. At the time, apartments cost $1,500 a month or more, and I was also just an hour and a half to 2 hours away from everything in Rockaway, Queens.
Did there come a time when you heard about an opportunity to move out? And can you tell us about that?
Yes, I jumped at the chance to live on my own again. Supportive housing was my only hope to regain my independence.
What was the process like?
The O'Toole process was long and arduous at first, and I have to admit I got discouraged when my first husband died. I stopped out for a few months, but when I found my current fiance, Roberto, he and I got back on the journey towards re-independence.
And were you ultimately able to move out? Where did you move to?
Yes, 2.5 years ago, my fiance and I moved into a beautifully sunny and accessible apartment in Regal Park, Queens. It was not easy finding a wheelchair-accessible apartment. I had to go in front of Judge Garifas again to ask if a bright, sunny apartment for me and a wheelchair-accessible apartment for him was possible. He agreed, and after 7 years or so on the list, a week later, we were shown our building. Months later, we moved into our beautifully sunny and accessible home. It's more than we could have imagined or expected.
Can you tell us what your life is like now that you're living independently?
We can afford a lot of beautifully flowering plants, a great view of Manhattan and the setting sun, plenty of shopping opportunities, unfortunately. We can eat out once in a while. We can snuggle up in front of a very large TV. We can go grocery shopping once a month without having to put things back due to lack of funds. We can stand tall and proud at the cashier instead of embarrassed to be pitifully poor. I can explore my hobbies. We are not overly social yet, but I'm working on it.
Diana. To wrap things up, what does living on your own mean to you?
I feel free to eat what I want when I want. I have help from my aide to cook. I can reach out for support when and if I need it. I have the space to be creative and free. I have money in the bank for a rainy day or a vacation. I feel at peace and safe in my home for the first time since I got sick. I can't ask for more. I am so grateful.
Thank you, Diana. Diana, we're so grateful you were here today to share your story. Thank you. I'll now turn this over to Robin Sue Frabozzi to talk more about the HHS Office of Civil Rights and Olmstead Enforcement Program. Robin Sue?
Thank you, Liz. And it's so great to be here and be part of the panel because certainly the Office for Civil Rights at HHS has had a long history of a very close partnership and working with Olmstead on a variety of Olmstead matters and issues. So we are really pleased to join. Let me describe myself. I'm Robin Sue Frabozzi, the Deputy Director of our Strategic Planning Division in the HHS Office for Civil Rights. I'm a white woman with short brown hair, wearing a bright pink jacket and pink beads over a black dress. And without giving away my age, I've been around long enough that I probably was working for the same amount of years since the Olmstead division, 25 years, looking for alternative theories to support people with disabilities and leaving institutions, and particularly during my work at that time at the Department of Justice. As you heard from our director of the Office for Civil Rights, Melanie Fontes Rainier, we have recently, during this administration, really revitalized and strengthened our Olmstead efforts in every domain, whether it's enforcement, policy, outreach, technical assistance. And a key part of all of this was our work to revise the regulations under Section 504, as well as the non-discrimination provision in the Affordable Care Act known as 1557, to actually incorporate specific provisions that codify Olmstead law. And so we are using these regulatory tools as well as our shared authority with the Department of Justice under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act to use all of these authorities to enforce Olmstead and the integration mandate. And of course, we also partner very closely with our sister agencies at HHS to provide concrete assistance to states in how to comply with integration requirements. You've heard about the Rhode Island case, both from our director as well as from Reagan. And in addition to that, as an example of the work that we were doing that is statewide or systemic, we actually have a number of complaints from individuals across the country who are telling us that they either are currently unlawfully institutionalized or at risk of being put in an institution because of lack of adequate community supports. And so we've developed an expedited case resolution process where we bring together the individual who has filed the complaint along with state officials and providers, and we work through exactly what is needed and what could be done within the state to be able to provide supports to individuals to live in their own homes and communities, or to move from an institution into the community setting. And so, as you've heard, we're so very pleased to be joined today by Garrett Fry, who filed a complaint with OCR and successfully worked through the expedited complaint resolution process to get the services he needed to be able to continue to live in his own home. You've heard a little bit about Garrett, and we'll hear firsthand from him, but I just want to tell you how special a person Garrett is. He really has been a lifelong, passionate, and effective advocate for disability rights, including, as you've heard, winning a case before the Supreme Court in 1999 to be able to go to public school with needed supports. And he's now an adult living an integrated and fulfilling life in the community. He wrote a motivational book called As I Am, about living with a disability, and he also is a gifted illustrator and illustrated a children's book called Benny and the Butterfly about being different. And so he and his family traveled here from Iowa to be here and to talk today about his experiences. Well, I'm also joined by my OCR colleague, Holly Garrett, who is the essential person who worked very closely with Garrett to get all of the services in place that he needed to be able to support him, And so thank you, Holly. And Holly is here to continue assisting you, Garrett, by also pulling up some of the thoughts that you have jotted down about the remarks that you want to make. And so, Garrett, people have talked about you, but can you just tell us firsthand a little bit about yourself?
Yes. I first want to say thank you, Robin Sue, and to Holly, to everyone with OCR, with the Department of Justice, HHS. I'm truly honored and blessed to be here today. I have been paralyzed for 37 years, and I'm a ventilator dependent man, and I've been paralyzed since the age of 4. I would describe myself, I have brown hair, brown eyes, and I am wearing a pink shirt with a white undershirt, and I'm currently 42 years old. So, for myself, I describe myself as a very active, passionate, optimistic, open-minded person. I have been fortunate to always live within my home, and I have been blessed to have the support of my family, many great friends, and many others. However, in order to live in my own home with my family, I need caregivers to help me throughout my day, taking care of my needs. They are my hands.
Indeed. And so what kinds of problems, Garrett, were you experiencing that led you to file a complaint with OCR?
There were many little things, which end up big things. I filed the complaint with OCR because I have been trying to get approval for 24/7 care within our own home. That's where I'm most happy. That's where we're most healthy. I was able to receive an increase in my waiver hours from 6 hours a day to 24 hours per day. Thank you. Thank you. But even then, it was impossible to hire, train, and keep caregivers due to the low reimbursement rate that I had. I asked for an increase in the rate so I could pay my caregivers a livable wage. But the state continued to deny our every request. I also requested for respite services to be provided within our own home, and they were also denied. I appealed each denial along the way, but never received a satisfactory response. I then contacted lawyers, legislators, senators, and even reached out to our governor's office. After many closed doors, I filed a complaint with the OCR, which finally started this process.
And so, Garrett, can you tell us a little bit more about what changes in your life occurred as a result of going through this expedited complaint resolution process and working through it? What services do you now have in place?
Well, my life and my family's life has positively changed, and it's dramatically changed. I now have 24/7 care coverage along with respite services. I was also able to recruit and pay caregivers a livable wage. I have nursing care twice a week, overnight coverage of caregivers, and daytime coverage for part of the day. Sometimes I still rely on my mother for my cares, my needs. These supports have helped me live a more productive, active, and independent life. My mother now is able to get a good night's rest, sleep, because of my overnight care. My mom is the most important person in my life, truly. She is here with me today, and I personally would like to recognize her. Thank you, Mom. My mom is here, Charlene. She is wonderful. She is great. She's amazing in multiple ways. I owe everything to many others, as I mentioned before. She needs to simply be just my mom, not my caregiver. I also feel as though I deserve to receive the services and the supports that I need.
And thank you, Garrett, for your advocacy and all the wonderful families out there that support individuals that have similar circumstances. Thank you for your passionate advocate. I do have I just have one final question, because I've been struck, as you and I have talked, about the fact that it took you 12 years to be able to win the right to be able to go to school, which finally came up to the Supreme Court, but 12 years to do that. And so we've sort of been reflecting about the fact that this process was, of course, a lot faster. And do you have any just overall thoughts, any parting remarks and things, messages that you'd like to share with others?
Yes. I feel as though if I had not filed a case with the OCR, I'm not sure, I don't believe, if it were not for the OCR, I would still be fighting for services I still need today. Filing a complaint with the OCR has really, truly been a game changer. I think about all the individuals out there with disabilities who do not have any other options, no other options, other than being placed in a hospital or a care facility, a nursing home, or an institution. This is why OCR is so important. Having the option to file a complaint ensures that individuals with disabilities, our voices are being heard, we're being respected, and we do have dignity. Thank you. Lastly, I hope by sharing my experiences with you today will help others in Iowa and continue to help other individuals with disabilities across our country facing similar obstacles and challenges. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here today. It's truly an honor, and I am going to continue my best to fight for others. And I will be there to do everything I can to help with the process. It's not easy. I tell you, it's a fight. But I will help each and everyone that I can. And I just want to say thank you all for being here. It's truly an honor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Gerd. It's certainly an honor to have you with us today. With that, I'll turn it back to Reagan.
Yes, thank you to all the panelists for being here today. Next, we'll see a short video featuring a few of the families from the Florida Olmstead case that Liz McDonald just described.
So my name is Julie, and this is my daughter Olivia. Can you say hi, Olivia? Hi. We still don't have a diagnosis for her. She has hypotonia, which is muscle weakness. She has autism. She has epilepsy. Olivia was in NICU for the first 4 months of her life. And when we were there, we were given a choice if we wanted her to come home with us with 24/7 skilled nursing at home, which they call private duty nursing, or she could be placed in a group home. I obviously chose for her to be with me. Olivia loves music. She loves to dance. You like to dance, right, baby? Yeah, you're a dancer. She likes to dance. She likes singing. She goes to music therapy once a week. She's now got a keyboard at home, so she likes to practice on the keyboard. And she also loves nature. She loves to be outside. Everybody loves Olivia. Olivia knows more people in my neighborhood than I do. I think kids thrive in a natural environment that we all like. We need a whole mixture of different things to see and do, different people to interact with. Like, you know, life isn't meant to see the same person day in, day out, be in the same room. You know, life is about changes, about meeting new people and embracing those changes.
My name is Martin Terrazales. I am Josiah Weston Woodbridge's guardian / dad. He's got special needs. He has cerebral palsy, scoliosis, but regardless of his condition and his ailments, he's a very happy kid. My boss man and the manager called me into the office and asked me if I would ever consider putting Josiah in a home so that I could make it to work on time and basically keep my job. So that was on a Friday, and I told him I'll think about it. When I came back Monday, I said, hell no. I still feel that the best place for a child is at home.
My name is Conlon Amore. I am Caden Amore's dad. So my son Caden has, he had a near-drowning incident when he was about 4 months old, and he lived in a facility, an extended care facility since that time. Right now he's 10 years old, and gladly we finally got him out of that facility. It's been about a year now since he's been home.
Hello, my name is Dorothy. I am Caden Amore's stepmom. We have been in a battle to bring him home from his extended care facility for about, I would say, it was going on 5 years before he came home.
To know that he is home, and he has nurses that literally love him, and I could see through his facial expressions and how he reacts with them that he loves them too. That's priceless.
I think it's a benefit to the community, for the family, for the individual, and the community itself. The community as a whole provides support for the family, but at the same time, the exposure to individuals like Caden, I feel, builds compassion. It builds patience, right? And understanding. The community gains from him being home, and then he gains from being home as well.
Next, I would like to introduce Marlene Sallow, the Executive Director of the National Disability Rights Network, the National Association of the Protection and Advocacy Network for People with Disabilities. Marlene has been a leader in the P&A network for many years. She previously served as the Staff Director of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and as Chief of Staff and Senior Counsel at the Community Relations Service of DOJ. Marlene will moderate a panel of people whose lives have been directly impacted by the Olmstead decision.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. As indicated, my name is Marlene Sallow, and I am an older, disabled Latina, a Cuban immigrant, with chin-length brown hair with gray highlights. I am wearing dark-rimmed glasses, a short-sleeve blue and white print blouse, and I go by the pronouns she, her, ella. As indicated, I am the Executive Director for the National Disability Rights Network, the nation's largest provider of legally based advocacy services for persons with disabilities. Our network is made up of 57 protection and advocacy agencies who conduct extensive work on Olmstead enforcement, Olmstead legal advocacy, and on a daily basis, we protect the rights of all people with disabilities so they can live independently and have their own choice on where they want to reside, where they want to work. And across the network, and especially for me, Olmstead means that persons with disabilities have a choice when it comes to community support services, rather than being segregated and placed in settings solely to receive those services. It doesn't mean being given a choice of segregation versus non-segregation. That's not what that means. It is also not about being placed in a segregated setting for our safety versus ensuring our autonomy and our freedom of choice. For us, Olmstead is not about, it is about integration more than anything else. But when you think about it, what does integration mean? To us, it means dignity. It means self-empowerment. It means equity, but most of all, it's justice. So today, I have the honor of introducing our panelists. So to my immediate left, I have James McClellan and his mom, Jenny, from Fresno, California. I have Justin Duvall and his mom, Sharon Ledford, from Hopewell, Virginia. And Theo Brady from Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, who is also a colleague and executive director for the National Council on Independent Living. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. So I will start to my immediate left. And James, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what services and supports you currently receive where you reside or where you live? So I got you. There you go.
Hello, I am James McClellan, a handsome teenage boy, 13-year-old, with a brown buzz cut and a black suit. I'm here today with my mom, Jenny, to my left, and my dad, Justin, and my sister, Josie, are in the audience over there. I'm part of the Little Lobbyists, a group that advocates for medically complex children like me. I am a 13-year-old child, and I live in Clovis, California. I just finished 7th grade, and I play percussion in the school band. I can run a 7:35-second mile. I'm fast. I'm a straight-A student, too. I'm also disabled. I know, I'm a real Renaissance kid. I'm proud to be disabled. It's a part of who I am. I have a tracheostomy. That's the tube in my neck. It helps me breathe. Olmstead means I have a nurse that goes to school with me to make sure I keep breathing while I'm in class. Thanks, Garrett, for making that possible, for fighting for nursing at school. I use a ventilator at night. That's a machine that breathes for me, because I don't breathe when I'm asleep. Olmstead means I have a nurse who comes to my house at night to manage my ventilator. If I roll over and the tubes disconnect, he reconnects everything to keep me breathing at night. Being disabled means I have to rely on other people. It's okay to rely on other people for care. I'm here today because I'm an Olmstead success story. I'm getting the care I need to live my life the way I want to live it. I want to make sure that other disabled people have the same access to the community of resources that I do. Nothing about us without us.
Next, we'll hear from Justin as to what services and supports he receives.
My name is Justin. I am 38 years old. I live at home with my mom and grandma in Prince George, Virginia. I love my job at Panera Bread. It is very important to me. I've been working at Panera Bread for 16 years. I get to welcome customers as they walk in the door, and I've made many friends there. I've also influenced Panera Bread to offer jobs to others with disabilities across the country. I also like to race in 5, 8, and 10Ks with others. I have a team that pushes me in my race chair that was made just for me. I'm a member of Pocahontas Racing as well as my team that helps me in the races. My favorite thing to do with my family is riding in the car, listening to my favorite music, going out to eat, going to church, and meeting up with friends.
Thank you. And next, we'll hear from Theo.
Again, my name is Theo Brady. I'm a black man, bald head, black shirt. Use a motorized wheelchair with a beard. I'm gonna use this time really quick. Instead of introducing myself, just Google me, right? But I was 15 years old and I lived in a nursing home. And a nursing home is no place for a 15-year-old. So I want to share this. I believe we are at a very important moment within society. We have made some major steps in the right direction due to the right president and the right leaders and key leadership within the federal agencies. We must figure out how to sustain what we have and keep pushing the needle in the right direction. A few years ago, I was at a church leadership meeting, and the pastor asked all of the leaders this question: what is your greatest fear? And we heard some great answers, but when it got to me, this is what I said. After all I have done, after all the people that I've helped, after all the changes I have made, my greatest fear is that I'm going to end up in a nursing home. And a lot of people, like myself, I'm sure, have that same fear. That is why delivering on the promise here is so important, and I love that theme. For years, SEALs and Advocate, many of you probably is in this room, will just go up to someone in a nursing home and say, do you want to get out of here? And they will say, yes. I know people who have done this. And then they do whatever they take to get that individual out of the nursing home. They use what they have. We have Olmstead. And we must use what we have. There's an NCD report, the National Council on Disability, states that the fastest growing population in a nursing home is people under 30 years old. That's devastating, right? Lastly, let me say this, and then I'll just go ahead. It does not escape me that yesterday was Juneteenth, all right? Although there was a law on the book, the Emancipation Proclamation, that provided freedom, it took 2.5 years before the enslaved folks received the good news that they was free. The Army delivered that news. We have Olmstead on the books. And there are a lot of folks that don't know that they are free and they have the option. They're institutionalized. That is why we need to deliver on the promise and deliver the good news that people can choose the option to live in the community. It brought me good news to see Mr. Fry. It took him, 12 years? It took the good folks in Texas 2.5 years before they realized that they were free. Let us not take 2.5 years. Let us not take 12 years to deliver the good news that people living in institutions can live in a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. Our next question is, how has the Olmstead decision been important to you?
That's for me?
Sorry, my apologies. No, we'll start with Jenny.
My name is Jenny McClelland. I'm a white woman with hot pink glasses and a hot pink suit and blonde hair. Olmstead is what makes our family work. Olmstead means that James can get the nursing care he needs to live safely at home with our family. He can attend school and he can have the life that he wants to live. Today, James is an Olmstead success story, but that wasn't always the case. James spent most of the first care of his life in an institution. Institutionalization of children is not a thing of the past. It happened to our family, and it is still happening to medically complex kids, just like James. The doctors at the hospital where James was born didn't give us the option to bring him home. They said if we brought him home, he would die, and it would be our fault. They said that even if he lived, his needs would be so overwhelming that our family would break. The medical system was the gatekeeper of our son's civil rights. They didn't mention Olmstead. They didn't tell us that Medicaid would pay for nurses to come to our house. They told us to trust the system. And the system was a pediatric subacute facility, an institution more than 200 miles away from our home. Putting James in that facility as a baby is the worst regret of my life. For a child with a tracheostomy, the biggest medical concern is keeping the airway open. But a baby crying isn't a medical problem. It's just a thing that babies do. You don't solve the problem of a baby crying by suctioning away the secretions. You solve it by picking the baby up. But in the facility, there was never enough staff to pick the babies up. If we weren't at the facility, he cried alone in his crib, sometimes for hours. On paper, institutional care provided 24/7 nursing care. It met his medical care needs, but it could not meet his most basic human needs. Olmstead means that we can do both. He can get nursing care and he can live at home with our family. Olmstead advocacy is very personal to me. I don't want what happened to our family to happen to anyone else, ever. As James grows into adulthood, I don't want him to have to sacrifice his independence and live in a segregated facility in order to get the care he needs. Today, James is an Olmstead success story. He has access to Medicaid. We live in California, a state that has best in the nation HCBS programs that pay family caregivers in addition to nurses who handle complex medical care tasks. We're able to be here today because Olmstead keeps our family together.
Thank you, Jenny. Next, Sharon and Justin, how has the Olmstead decision been important in your lives?
I am diagnosed with developmental, physical, and intellectual disabilities. Olmstead allows me to get the services I need to live in my own home in the community. I have a personal assistant who helps me get ready each day. She helps me to bathe, get dressed, and brush my teeth and do all the other things I can't do for myself. My service coordinator meets with us once a month. She is great. She helps connect me with the services I need. I'm able to do things in the community like the Brooks and Dunn concert last Friday night in Virginia Beach. I like going to concerts.
And me, I guess I need to turn it on. Institutions were never an option for us. Justin's this shaken baby survivor. At 6 weeks, his father shook him until he went into cardiac arrest. And the doctors came to me because after that, his father was no longer in the picture. and said that he would be better off in an institution. I said, I don't think so. They said, oh, you can have other children, you're young. I don't think so. Anyway, they said, well, he's going to be blind, he's going to be a vegetable, he'll never do anything. All he's ever going to do is lay in this bed. And so they pretty much said he was disposable. So I took him home after 3 months in the hospitals. And we pretty much grew up with Olmstead. And Olmstead allows him to live with us in our home. It supports his needs. It's paid caregivers. And they've gotten better over the last 15 years. We did the, matter of fact, they've gotten better over the last 10 because we were a part of the 15-year celebration. And I've seen lots of improvements, but we've still got a long way to go. And I can't wait to see the improvements.
Thank you so much for that. And Theo, how has the decision been important to you?
Mr. Fry touched on why Olmstead is so important to me. So many of us have relied on our loved ones, our family, our friends to provide us with the daily needs and services that we have, so many of us take for granted. Home and community-based services, direct care workers who assist me on a day-to-day basis. If I didn't have that, it would fall on my family, my friends. And so all of us know that who have loved ones know that they have lives too, and they deserve to pursue their own individual aspirations. But when they have someone that have needs, they're going to sacrifice their lives, right? We know that. And so we have Olmstead. And so like I said earlier, we use what we have.
Thank you. And finally, along with what Sharon said, right, there's still room for improvement. There's still more that needs to be done. Could each one of you provide me with one thought about what do we still need to work on?
Olmstead means disabled people, like James, have a civil right to access care in their own homes, unless they can't, because the program in their state has a wait list. Wait, civil rights can have wait lists? Our life works because James has access to nursing care at home through a Medicaid home and community-based services waiver program. There are disabled children just like James who can't access care at home because they're stuck on wait lists, sometimes for years. What's even worse, every state gets to set their own rules on who qualifies for services. That means some disabled people are locked out of getting care at home because their needs don't check the right boxes on a piece of paper. We're a middle-class family. My husband's a PE teacher, and I'm a retired injured police officer. In California, James qualifies for a waiver program that provides Medicaid institutional deeming. We can't move because we don't know if any other state has access to programs that James needs. Even when disabled people have access to HCBS waivers, low Medicaid reimbursement rates make it difficult to actually find nurses and caregivers. Many personal care attendants make minimum wage or close to it. The nurse who works with James overnight could make twice as much if he worked in a hospital. The dignity of disabled people living at home and the dignity of care workers are two sides of the same coin. The new rules that will require 80% of Medicaid dollars to go to the actual workers who are providing care is a great start. But we can't fulfill the promise of Olmstead until we have Medicaid reimbursement rates that are enough to pay caregivers a living wage. When James lived in institutional care, the system paid $500,000 every year, no questions asked. Providing care at home is dramatically cheaper, and the care he gets is dramatically better. Olmstead makes life work for disabled people, but we can make Olmstead work better.
Thank you. Sharon and Justin, would you like to add anything to?
It would be helpful to have more technology available to assist me. For example, I have one stair lift in our home that the waiver helped pay for. We had to pay for the other one because we have L-shaped stairs. It would be nice to have one that was curved so that I could get upstairs without changing chairs on small landing. I can't transfer by myself, and sometimes it's scary. My occupational therapist arranged an evaluation for an OB, which is an adaptive eating device that allowed me to eat independently. That was so cool. That was the first time I ever got to feed myself. But I was denied by Medicaid. I like it better when someone from my family provides supports for my needs. I don't like strangers bathing me.
Thank you. And finally, Theo.
I got a bunch,
Yes.
but I'm gonna give you two. Direct care workers, right? We're in a crisis, right? And we got to figure out a way to pay our caregivers, our attended care workers, our direct care workers, whatever you want to call it. We got to figure out a way to pay them and give them benefits. Otherwise, we're going to continue to be in a crisis, and we can't find qualified people to do this job. And it's so essential. The other one is we got to figure out how to fix Medicaid, right, in regard to the restrictions, in regard to asset limits. We have people who are concerned about losing major supports like attendant care and health care because they're making a little bit too much money according to those Medicare guidelines. I myself could not afford to pay the fees associated with I was assessed for 38 hours a week. I couldn't afford to pay the fees associated with that, so I reduced my attendant care to 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, right? And so now the things I need to do, like I have to watch how much fluid I drink during the day, right? Things like that should not be in place just because of Medicaid restrictions. And so we got to fix that.
Thank you so very much to all of our panelists here today, and it has been an honor to hear from each and every one of you. Thank you. So now I'm going to switch over here. And it's my pleasure to now introduce you to Allison Barkoff. Yes. Allison leads the Administration for Community Living, for short, but she does so much for our community. She is a true ally to each and every one of us here in community, but also out there. And she is an extremely talented attorney who has litigated multiple Olmstead cases. And it's my honor to introduce Allison Barkoff.
Thank you so much to Marlena and to all the panelists. That was really such an incredibly powerful panel. Anniversaries are an incredible time to celebrate what we've achieved and to motivate us to address unfinished business. And it's really important that we recognize the people who got us here. Saturday, the 25th anniversary, is a day to honor the courage of Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson. The two brave women who were plaintiffs in the Olmstead case, and the dedication and vision of Sue Jamison, the legal aid attorney who filed the lawsuit on their behalf. As a fellow Georgian, along with Theo actually, I was lucky enough to see the life that Lois created for herself after leaving the Georgia Regional Hospital, becoming a renowned artist and beloved community member, and to also work with Sue as she dedicated her career to making the promise of Olmstead a reality. We have a lot to celebrate, as we just heard. Over the last 25 years, we have changed expectations. Community living is now the rule rather than the exception. Families in general are no longer told, like mine was many years before Olmstead, that the only place for their family member born with a disability is in an institution. Disabled people are now our classmates, our coworkers, our neighbors. My brother Evan is now living the vision of Olmstead in his own apartment with a roommate, with a girlfriend, with an incredible job, with an incredible social life, and as a valued member of his community, because our communities are richer when everyone is included. And of course, this only happened because of the strong advocacy of disabled people, families, advocates, civil servants, and partners. So we have a lot to celebrate. And at the same time, although the Supreme Court's ruling in Olmstead made clear that disabled people have a civil right to live and fully participate in their communities, it did not create the sea change we had all hoped. We cannot rest until Olmstead is a reality for all. So, what we've heard about today so far, we have to make sure people know about their obligations and their responsibilities through policies and regulations like the new 504 regs. Enforcement is critical when those responsibilities aren't met, as we heard from the enforcement panel. And most important, we need the input of people with disabilities themselves to make sure programs and services meet their needs and preferences. And that last panel was so powerful. But Olmstead can only be a reality when people get the services and supports they need to live the life they want. That requires that we create the infrastructure to support community living. That's home and community-based services. That's affordable, accessible housing. That's employment opportunities, behavioral health supports, transportation, and more. And it requires partnerships and coordination across federal government, with states and communities, and between the public and private sectors. And from the first day, and I was a day one Biden-Harris appointee, we were charged with that partnership and that collaboration. So, to close out today's program, we are going to talk about some of the ways that we in the federal government have been doing that. I'll just say, we heard in the last panel from every single person about the direct care workforce crisis. It is truly the thing that keeps me up every night thinking about how we are on the cusp of rolling back on the progress unless we can address this crisis. And guess what? At ACL, we reached out to our partners and said, we have got to use every tool in our toolbox, working together with the Department of Labor and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and SAMHSA to launch a direct care workforce strategy center, working with states to leverage every resource out there. You'll hear in a minute about the work we've done around affordable, accessible housing, making sure we're partnering across the federal government to coordinate services and housing. We've worked with CMS to make sure that the voices of disabled people and their families inform policies around home and community-based services. And those are just a few of the many examples. So I would like to invite my federal partners up to the stage now. am so excited for you all to hear, and I know we are getting close to time, but I don't want to short shrift my colleagues, so I hope you'll give us grace of maybe 5 to 7 minutes. But I am really excited for you to hear the power of collaboration, the force multiplier when we work together, and hear how we are really thinking about seizing the opportunity to build what we need for community living like never before. So I want to first introduce Taryn Williams, who is the Assistant Secretary for Labor at the Assistant Secretary for Labor for Disability Policy at the Department of Labor. Richard Cho, next to her, who serves as Senior Advisor for Housing and Services to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Dr. Anita Everett, who's the Director of the Center for Mental Health Services at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Okay, so let's jump in. I'm going to start with talking about housing. And Richard, we have spent a lot of time, actually, we're repeat offenders. We were here in the Obama administration working on these very issues and decided the day we got in, you were about a week 2 appointee, maybe 3. This was an issue we felt like we had to work on together, because one of the biggest barriers to living in the community is the lack of affordable, accessible housing. So Richard, please start by talking to us about how HUD is tackling this problem from so many directions.
Thank you so much, Allison. First of all, I'll just say I'm really honored to be here. My name is Richard Cho, and I serve as a senior advisor at HUD. And my role is really to think about how HUD can pair housing with supportive services to support community living. So I'm as close as you come to having the Olmstead person at HUD. I'll just also state I'm a Korean-American man in his late 40s. I'm wearing a light gray suit and a striped tie. If I go back once in a while and read the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's decision in Olmstead for inspiration. And I'll note that the words housing is mentioned only once in that entire decision. It's mentioned in the context of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. The word supportive housing certainly doesn't appear in that. But what does appear is first of all, the right of people with disabilities to not be in an institutional setting when their needs don't require it, and also when they no longer desire to be in that setting. And it also affirms that the ADA's mission is not to drive people out of institutions into homelessness, which is actually something that the decision explicitly mentions. So implicit in that Olmstead decision is the idea that you can't actually implement Olmstead, you can't fulfill Olmstead's vision without having housing, and in particular housing plus services. Now we are unfortunately in the midst of one of the worst housing shortages in our nation's history, in particular a shortage of affordable housing. I think it's really important to think about how the Olmstead decision makes it clear that just having a lack of affordable housing or accessible housing is no excuse for violating the rights of people with disabilities. And I think it should really charge us all to really talk more about why we need to address housing. Our housing shortage is not something that HUD can solve overnight, but it is something we're working every day to try to address. We are certainly looking to try to increase the supply of affordable housing through our programs. We're also looking to expand access to rental assistance that makes housing affordable. In the last 3 years, in fact, we've actually issued 120,000 new housing choice vouchers. That's more vouchers issued in a 3-year time period than in 20 years. So we're making up for a lot of lost time. But specifically to support community living, we're taking a number of actions. First and foremost, we have several specific programs that are designed to help create affordable and accessible housing for people with disabilities. One of those is called the Section 811 program. And through that program, we actually provide both project-based rental assistance, where we partner with with states who then partner with private landlords to actually create affordable housing that's integrated and that sets aside units for people with disabilities. And we also recently relaunched a capital advance version that's actually increasing the supply, but where we're creating no longer group homes, but rather integrated housing into the community. And in the last 3 years, we've awarded $212 million to expand Section 811 housing. In addition, we have a special version of our housing choice vouchers. Some of you have heard of Section 8 vouchers that are called mainstream vouchers. And those are vouchers that are specifically intended to help people with disabilities to live in the community and to either exit institutions or avoid institutional care. And we've done some work to try to expand those with the resources that Congress has provided. We've created about 4,000 additional vouchers. So we now have 71,000 mainstream vouchers that are specifically intended to help people with disabilities transition to the community. But what we've heard from many communities across the country is that those vouchers aren't really reaching the people who are in institutional settings or segregated settings and who need to transition to the community. And so I'm really pleased to share with you today that in the coming days, we'll be issuing new guidance that provides additional flexibilities that will enable housing authorities who administer mainstream vouchers to enter into specific referral partnerships with Medicaid agencies, with Centers for Independent Living, and with other agencies that support community living so that people who are stuck in institutional settings or in segregated settings can get priority access to these vouchers. I'll just add, those flexibilities also will extend the amount of time that people with disabilities have to get a voucher. So most people, you get a voucher, and then you usually have about 60 days to try to find an apartment, or you have to turn back that voucher. Well, we're making it a requirement that people with disabilities will get 120 days at a minimum, with additional extensions of 90 days that must be provided as a reasonable accommodation. And then this last thing that I'll just mention, we're seeing with the growing rise of homelessness, we're seeing a disturbing trend where more states and communities are looking at either the criminalization of homelessness or looking at reinstitutionalizing people who are experiencing homelessness. And we're working to combat some of that. Certainly, we're actually issuing more resources to help communities create permanent supportive housing, community-based housing to address homelessness. We've expanded permanent supportive housing resources, $360 million in grants that specifically increase permanent supportive housing, including $221 million that's specifically for people who are sleeping on streets and in encampments. We've issued $5 billion through the American Rescue Plan to help communities expand permanent supportive housing. There's 22,000 units of additional permanent supportive housing that's coming online. And later this year, we'll be issuing a new funding opportunity for another $175 million to expand permanent supportive housing. So we're doing everything we can to help communities avoid the temptation to go down the path of reinstitutionalizing people from homelessness and to essentially violate their rights.
Thanks, Richard. Karen, we heard a lot about expectations and changing expectations, and the expectations around employment have changed a lot over the last several years. Can you talk a little bit about how Olmstead and employment are interrelated, and just briefly, the work of ODEP?
I caught that you said briefly, and I understand we're close to time, so I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. Hi, everyone. I'm Taryn Williams. I have the privilege of serving as Assistant Secretary for Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. And in that role, I lead our Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP for short. We were created a little more than 20 years ago. In fact, we are just a little bit younger than the Olmstead decision. And we were created to bring a particular focus across policies, programs, and systems that ultimately advance employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And often when we're talking about employment opportunities, we're not just talking about the number of people who are employed, but also the quality of those employment opportunities. What I want you all to know about the work that we do at ODEP and the relationship with Olmstead is that those two are inextricably linked. We cannot deliver on the promise of Olmstead without delivering on the promise for people with disabilities to have the opportunities to develop aspirations, to be able to learn and earn and thrive in their communities, and to do so truly as independently and interdependently as is possible. And one of the ways that we continue to do that work at ODEP is in partnership with all of you. Allison said earlier that she was a day one employee. I came in a little bit later than Allison, but I can tell you it feels at times that we've been nearly connected at the hip. And that's because that we know delivering on the promise of Olmstead means collaborating and forging and strengthening partnerships that exist across our federal agencies. One of the real concrete ways that we've done this goes back to, I think, almost 2-3 years ago in 2022, when we worked together with 8 other agencies, including those sitting at this table, to put out resources for states focus on how they can blend, braid, or sequence, or in essence, bring their funding together to support, ultimately to support community living, to support independence, and to support their journey into competitive, integrated employment. We also partnered with those same agencies to develop a framework on community engagement, always with our goal of working alongside our federal partners, our state partners, and our local partners, equipping states, systems, and communities with the resources they need in order to ensure that every single person with a disability has the opportunity to live independently in their community. We will continue that work, and I know I'm getting that little eye, so I will say one other thing. I could spend hours up here talking to you about the work that we're doing at the Department of Labor. But I do want to make you aware of something that we shared on the seats for those of you who are in the room, or also for those of you who are online. It is one of the many policy resources that we've developed to recognize the 25th anniversary of Olmstead. There's a little QR code. It talks about the milestones, and it talks about the ways in which we as an agency continue to partner with other agencies to support advanced and competitive integrated employment. So thank you.
Anita, I'm going to turn it to you now. Psychiatric disabilities were really front and center in the Olmstead case. And people with psychiatric disabilities are very often the people who are unable to access community services, and many, many people are still only offered institutional care. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work that SAMHSA is doing to increase community-based behavioral health services, and maybe weave in the next question I was going to ask around partnerships?
Yeah, great. So thank you, Allison, and I am mindful of the time. Me as a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and a blue and white shirt, it is a privilege to be here among this crowd, and I invite us all to think about, for every one person here, how many thousands of people that are not here have been aided by Olmstead over the last 25 years. It's phenomenal. In so many ways, we've got a ways to go, as you know, others before have said. And yes, mental illness, I was going to bring up if you didn't, Allison. And mental illness, to us in the mental health community, the idea that mental health counts as a kind of disability that's covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act is critical for us. And so that was a very important component of that decision, which asserts, you know, a right for all of us to live well in a community of our choice. We have multiple programs to look at, and the details of which are available on our website. Two of programs that I want to specifically talk about very quickly, which we believe provide a vision for ideal services that should be available to individuals living with mental illnesses across their communities. One program is called Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic Programs, CCBHCs. We have these now in almost every state. I think there are 2 or 3 states that don't have one. They provide a full array of services. They have access requirements, so this concept of a waiting list, which so many have dealt with for so long, is not allowed under the CCBHC criterion. It has components of quality once you're in the services, and it also has ongoing recovery support services that so many individuals with more severe mental illnesses need. All of these are required nationally, so this concept that's been referenced earlier with fragmentation that has sometimes is based in different decisions that states make from their Medicaid programs and other programs that states administer that are different one state to the next. This CCBHC program is a national standard, so we can't say enough about how proud we are to have been part of the ability to administer this program, and also that this administration has been very supportive and upfunded the CCBHC program tremendously. It involves a partnership with multiple other federal agencies, CMS being chief among those, but also ASPE, other parts of HHS, and ACL is very involved in one of the components that has to do with a rehab component of the CCBHC program. So it's a really nice example of the way that this administration has paved the way for us all to work together. Another one I want to talk about, of course, Olmstead also applies to children, is our Systems of Care grant series, which provides a model, a kind of role model across communities to recognize that not just one system is the answer to any one of the children with more complex needs, mental health needs, juvenile justice needs, education needs. This is a program that has been fairly long-standing, again, has been upfunded, requires multiple partners at the federal, state, and local level to administer the program on behalf of the children, so the children and their families that have an array of different needs have access to. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today with you.
Thank you. Okay, in 60 seconds, I am going to ask Richard to talk about a major partnership that really is across federal government around coordinating housing and services. So Richard.
Okay, challenge accepted, Allison. I'll say, again, it was maybe day 20 of the administration when Allison and I spoke about the fact that on the one hand, there are greater opportunities than ever to link housing and supportive services to realize community living, Medicaid, home and community-based services, many different HUD programs. And really what makes community living possible is housing plus services. Really simple, right? But there's nothing simple about using federal resources to put housing plus services together. It is incredibly complicated. The way I think about it is you give somebody some Legos, Lincoln Logs, and Tinker Toys, and you tell them to build something, right? None of those pieces fit together. And so Allison and I, we worked together. I put our agencies and our staff together, and we said, let's figure out how we can help states and communities put these pieces together, link Medicaid, SAMHSA resources with HUD programs to really ensure that they can fully realize the federal resources to make community living possible. And we created a joint TA center called the Housing and Services Resource Center, which is a one-stop shopping for resources and information on how you can put together HUD programs, HHS programs to actually create supportive housing and housing plus services. In addition, we launched something called the Housing and Services Partnership Accelerator. We literally patched together federal technical assistance resources across HUD, SAMHSA, ACL, and other HHS agencies to say we are going to handhold several states who are taking advantage of these new Medicaid flexibilities to cover housing-related supportive services, and so they can actually, we can help them implement them. We're pleased that we're currently helping 9 states with their implementation of Medicaid housing services with HUD programs to be able to create community living opportunities. And I'm also pleased that Congress actually awarded us $2.5 million to actually do another round of this Housing and Services Partnership Accelerator that we'll be launching later this year.
Great, thank you. If everyone could give a round of applause for our last panel. And I just want to close out today's event saying a few things. Honestly, we are where we are because of the force that is the disability community. Everything you heard about today is because of you, because of your advocacy, because of you telling us what our priorities need to be, because you pushing for regulations like Section 504, because you pushing the Department of Justice and bringing cases. So today is about celebrating in community, and today is about recommitting to make sure that, as we say in our community, all means all, and we cannot rest until Olmstead is a reality for everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming today.